Welcome, everyone, to episode number 56 here on the Proven Knowledge Podcast. This is the Creator Series. Today, I welcomed another graphic designer guest. He's actually the person that designed our Proven Knowledge logo, and he's worked with me and Jay Trey on several of his albums before, designing the cover art and the track list. He goes by the name of Dapr Graphics. He joined me today to discuss his beginnings in kind of getting into design and specifically doing album art. He's worked with the likes of Nate Good and Audio Push and many, many more. I remember discovering his work around 2014 when he did some fan art, and then I reached out to him a few years later when me and Jay were looking for a graphic designer to help us out. And we've been working ever since around 2017, so it was good to finally have a conversation with him and kind of get to know more about him and everything. And I'm glad to see that he's doing, still doing art, and he's moved into a lot of different things, doing graphic work for different companies and things like that. And I thought this episode was very cool. We had a conversation specifically about, the direction that certain artists take with album art and kind of the decision making that could go, behind why certain artists choose certain things to represent, like albums, for example. Like we talked about J. Cole. The off season, how that's just like a picture, with no text or anything. And we talked about the different levels of artistry and, the kind of the ins and outs and his opinions on it and everything, which I thought was a really cool thing to talk about. But this is another really, unique episode, and I enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to episode number 56 here on the Proven Knowledge Podcast. This is the Creator Series. Today we have our second graphic design guest. I've worked with this guy now for around 4 years. He's worked with Jay on a lot of his album arts. He's also worked with Nate Good, Audio Push, a lot of other music artists. And he actually helped us design the logo for Proven Knowledge, which is very interesting. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Dapr Graphics. How are you, man?
Great, man. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Obviously, we've been talking now for a little bit before we started recording and everything. And, like I said, I'm glad to get you on the show. I've been looking forward to this episode for a while now. So basically, to start off every episode, we just have the guests give a little bit of background as far as how they got into, what they do. Obviously, for you, it's graphic design. It's not specifically music, but you're in the realm of music. So just kind of give a little bit of information as far as your beginnings go.
Yeah. So I guess to start off, I've always been a visual person and drawn towards art in general. I've always been visually based. I was always drawing a lot as a kid, and when I was in my formative teenager years, I actually was quite heavily involved in graffiti and writing graffiti, and was very in-depth in the northeastern graffiti scene, running through train yards, on train tracks, painting bridges. Flew out to Kansas City, painted a couple billboards on highway free passes. So was, vandalizing, but always artistic and artistically based. But I got arrested a handful of times, from when I was like 15 to 17. And I had a good enough head on my shoulders that I realized that I probably either had to get smarter about doing it, or I had to put my art somewhere else and in a more effective manner. So after that, I started to slowly transition from, doing it on walls and in black books to doing it on the computer. And I was always, my entire life, gravitated towards music and hip-hop specifically. And I just started creating cover arts and creating artwork that went along with that type of music. And, when I was first starting, a lot of my early designs were because, either the stuff that was coming out at that time was that was in like the prime blog rap era, and so much music was getting pumped out at such a fast rate from all these different artists that were coming up, and independent artists at the time. And so many of them didn't even have access to graphic designers or have artwork ready for their music. So often what would happen is, artwork would come out and there wouldn't even be cover art to go along with the music. And as technology progressed, and you went from having an iPod and you had the little cover art that was like a quarter of an inch on your iPod, to now you have cover artwork on your iPhone or your iPad or your iMac, and it could be huge. The visual representation's grown as the medias have changed and as things have changed in that landscape. So that's kind of how I got into it. I just was always attracted to music, and I always felt like if I was going to do artwork, I wanted to do artwork that was involved in something else I was passionate about. And music and art always just kind of seemed to coincide with each other and always crisscross. So it just felt natural and seemed like a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, super awesome, man. And I'm glad to hear that you were kind of able to combine both things, like you said, that you were passionate about into kind of one. And for me, I remember like discovering your page, and I just remember like looking at all your designs, and I was like, there's a lot of detail in all these designs. Like, they're not basic, they're not like very simple. Like, you have a very unique style. Like, even like the J. Cole edit you just did like a couple weeks ago, I was like, this is fucking amazing. Like, this looks cooler than the actual like cover art, because the cover art was just a picture, you know what I mean? Like, it was just a picture with the parental advisory thing, and it was cool. But like that edit you did with like the smoke and everything, and like the way you designed it with the text, I was like, that's amazing. Like, that's I don't know, that's just kind of the artwork that has always like caught my eye, is that type of artwork. So I got a kind of follow-up question. This isn't even on the like my set of questions, but how do you feel about like how artwork is kind of moving nowadays? Because in my opinion, I feel like for album art, it's almost becoming more minimalistic, kind of like the pictures, where it's just like, it might just be a picture of the artist and no text and nothing else, and then just that's it. You know what I mean? Like, how do you feel about that? Like, has that ever like been an issue for you as far as how you approach it from a graphic design standpoint when you're trying to do like a lot more and a lot more cool stuff? Or like, how do you feel about that? Or do you agree with that, I guess is what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I agree with it. I think first and foremost, I think the important thing is that the cover art it's a visual representation or reflection of the music, or it should be in my mind. So it should go along with the music that's accompanying. And what I mean by that is, you think about like a book with a cover. You don't have book covers that the cover doesn't make any sense to the story of the book or go along with the book. But you have many different book covers, whether it's like a picture or whether it's something someone designed. So there's a lot of similar parallels. I think, and it's funny you mentioned the portrait-based cover arts, because I don't have a problem with those at all. I'm very attracted to like photographically based images for cover design. And obviously today you see a lot of like Photoshop design and a lot of like a lot of mixed media, where it's like pulled together different elements. It's not necessarily where the artist held a photo shoot with the intent of making one of these photos the cover of their album, right? So I guess like what I mean by that is, you think of an album like J. Cole, perfect example. We'll just go with him because you just brought him up. So going back to I'm gonna get off on a tangent here a little bit for you. So if you think about the off season's cover art, I personally loved it because even though I think it could have been done a little bit better, they probably could have used a little bit better imagery for it that they probably had. I love the story that it tells because it's kind of a callback and kind of goes back to the come up and the warm up days. So like the warm up, they shot that on, I believe it was a basketball court in New York City at Holy Christ High School. So it was a revisitation of that earlier work. So I think where it makes sense, I like it a lot. When it's done distastefully is when I don't like it, of course. I don't like when the cover art or the album art is an afterthought of the project. I always feel like that should be something that should be visualized and thought of and kept in mind throughout the whole journey and process. And you have artists who do, and definitely you can see that reflection in their work. It tells a story. It tells, it doesn't look like it was just thrown together last minute. But then you have obviously other artists who they don't care what their cover art is that goes with their music, and they might just have a contest on Twitter to get whoever does it for free, and then that they're just slime balls looking for free work from people that don't know better yet. But I would say I've always been really attracted to like the photographically based cover art. Some of my favorite albums are iconic images. I mean, like especially the 90s. You think back to the 90s and like the era that I was born and raised in primarily, and it's like everyone from whether it was like Nas's Illmatic, it's a picture of Nas's face. Like Wu-Tang Clan, you have 36 Chambers where you have the whole group on the cover and ski masks, or you might have any of Jay-Z's early discography. It's all pictures of Hove. Eminem, same thing. Slim Shady LP, Marshall Mathers LP. They're all photographically based images that the cover art is completely built off of. And you can see that, and it feels right, and it makes sense. But then, like I said, there's other instances where it probably was more of an afterthought. So I always, to answer your question in a really roundabout, long, extended way, I definitely always appreciate when it's done well.
Yeah.
But I think it has a time and a place, right? So when it makes the most sense.
I guess for me, it's just the ones where there's no text. It's maybe not so much the photo. It's like when there's a photo and there's no text or anything. There's no like album title or artist name or anything. So you're just looking at a photo. And I'm like, now if you're a big artist and like you've already been established and you've told a story already, maybe you don't need that. Maybe you just need the photo and that's it. The music will speak for itself. And like the J. Cole thing, like you said, it ties in with the old mixtape. So people already know what it's about because they know his brand and they know his story and who he is as an artist. But like, I feel like if you're a smaller artist or someone trying to get known, if it's just a photo, it's like, I mean, it's not really calling my attention. You know what I mean? It's just like, you got to throw some text on there or throw something that's like, this is what it is. You know what I mean? I guess that's more so like what I was meaning, but I see what you were saying where it's like, it doesn't really matter about like if it's like heavily like edited or whatnot, or if it's just a photo or whatever. I think it's more like the text than anything. But
yeah, I think it's definitely important for. So again, I think if there's a reason for it and a why for it, then and they can express that reasoning for it or make it clear to their audience, then I think it makes sense. So like what I mean by that is, think of someone who's like up and coming, mysterious, or wants to be mysterious, kind of is playing off of that mysterious approach. So like someone that comes to mind is like The Weeknd. When The Weeknd was first coming out, like all his cover arts you didn't even know what The Weeknd looked like. You didn't even know if The Weeknd was just one guy. You didn't know if it was a guy and a girl. You didn't know if it was two guys. You didn't know who that. You know what I mean? It was so anonymous, but it was intentional, and that was done with a purpose. Yeah. Whereas, if you look at someone who's, like you said, bigger and established, and they do that. So like, I think of like. So J. Cole even is another perfect example. So he just did the off-season record, right? Which just shows him on the court with the hoop on fire. No text, like you said. Doesn't say J. Cole on there anywhere on the front. Doesn't say the off-season anywhere on there. But if you go back to his earlier albums, when he was first establishing himself, he had J. Cole on there. Yeah. He had the warm-up on there. He had the Cole World Sideline Story. He had the whole titles on there. It wasn't until he got to like Born Sinner on his second album where you see him freeing himself kind of putting the text on there, because I think in my mind at least he probably felt like he had solidified his audience and his fan base, and even though it was still definitely growing at that point, he was able to ride that wave essentially, and it wasn't necessary, or as necessary as it was when he was beginning.
Yeah.
When you're younger, when you're an up-and-coming artist, or an artist who's new into the game, I think it's probably more important that you have your name on there so people know. And you know, you want to kind of be loud and set yourself out apart and get that attention of the listener, because to your point, if it's someone that's more established, like, you're not at that point, you're not listening to music off of their album artwork.
Yeah.
You know, like some people do. You're listening to them because they're an established artist and you know what they're going to give you, or you know what you're looking for. But if it's a newer artist, you might not even press play unless you like the cover art, or you think the cover art looks good or is attractive. If you know, you're gonna, even though they always say don't judge a book by its cover, you're most likely gonna judge that book by its cover, regardless.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, I think is the more established you get, the less and less vital it is, and you see that across a lot of people's different discographies. You know, I mean, just thinking off the top of my head, like Drake was the same thing with his first albums. Like, his first albums had Take Care on there as a title. But then you start to see, like, Views is not, it's not on there. It's just the picture. So I think that it goes a lot. It coincides a lot with the growth of the artist, and as their fan base becomes more aware of who they are.
Yeah. It always makes me wonder, too, like, what behind the scenes, like, what conversations are being had when they're doing this type of thing, you know what I mean? Like, is it all the artists, like, having the input, or is it, like, some of the other people, like, telling them, be like, we should do this, like, this concept, and, like, I've always wondered that with, like, some of my favorite albums, be like, you look at the cover, and you're just like, how'd they come up with that, you know what I mean? It's, like, it's stuff we'll never probably know, but it's always, like, interesting to kind of think about, you know?
So I think, I mean, just from my time and working with the artists I've had the pleasure to work with over the years, I would say it depends how involved the artist wants to be on it. So I think you have artists who are very in tune with what their cover art is and how it is and looks, and they, whether it's an album or whether it's someone that's up and coming, that they put a lot of time and thought into it. And you can see that reflection throughout, if it's consistent or not. And if you think about it, like, like someone like Russ, even when he was up and coming, before he really became as established as he's become over the last 4 to 5 years, going back 6-7 years ago, he was doing the same thing with his cover art, where it was the colored square with the little logo, and so many other people copied it after that. But Russ and his graphic designer, Fuda Farm, shout out to Fuda, they've done all his artwork, his entire, like, uprising. And I think Russ is involved in, like, because you can tell that it's very, like, he's working directly with this person. Yeah. There's no, like, middlemen people. I think the higher you get, and when you're on a label, and if you have less care for that, or less, I don't want to say care, because it's not like, like J. Cole just did the off season, like we were saying. Like, it's not like J. Cole didn't go and do that photo shoot intentionally with that. Like, he knew what the idea was. Do we know if J. Cole came up with the idea to, like, go back to the basketball hoop and set it on fire? Probably not. It was probably, like, Felton's idea or someone else from Dreamville. But, I think it's definitely on a situation-by-situation basis. I think, again, if the artist wants to be involved and wants to have their say on it, they will. I think if they don't care that much and someone else is going to handle it, and they have the faith instilled in that person to, carry an image or get an image that goes with their music that they're putting out, then they handle it that way. But it depends on what hats they decide to wear, I feel like.
Yeah. So, obviously, we just mentioned you worked with a good amount of artists already. So, is there anyone specifically that you just really enjoy collaborating with, that you kind of have a good workflow with, out of all the people that you've done projects for?
Yeah, most definitely. I would say, I mean, I've been very blessed and fortunate to have worked with, I would say, the majority of the artists that I've worked with have all been pleasurable to work with, and I have worked with, there's only very few artists that I've only ever worked with once and done.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say Audio Push, number one, just because our working relationship goes back to like end of 2012, early 2013, like right around HS87, right when HS87 started to pop off. And then Nate Good as well. Nate and I have been doing or working consistently together for the last 4 or 5 years now as well. And I do all his, for basically Audio Push and Nate. And Audio Push, there's a couple others that also contribute. So it's not me every single time that does the artwork, but I would say primarily with Audio Push and Nate Good, they're definitely the top two that come to mind just because I have the longest working relationships with them. And it's always, it's effortless. Like, I know when Price texts me, I know what he wants. He's direct. I know what he's looking for. We don't, it's very clear. If I have a question, I'll just call him. Same with Nate. And, shout out to Nate too, because Nate gives me so much creative control or freedom, in my design work, that it's almost flawless because it's, I'm able to work on what I want to work on, and generally it's an accompaniment of the music, and I design it while I'm listening to the music in most instances. So I would say that as far as artists, and then you and J Trey, of course, as well, but definitely anyone who's able to bring me a concept and we're able to talk about it like, grown adults and humans and have a good conversation. I would say those three are definitely the ones that come to mind.
I was gonna say, I feel like on your Instagram, I've seen probably Nate Good the most. Like, I feel like I see you work with him a lot because he drops a lot of music too. Like, he drops singles and little projects here and there. So, and I always see like you're the graphic designer. So that's kind of what I always like think of when I think of your stuff because I see it the most. But like you said, you've done stuff with Audio Push, and like you just worked on Price's like new album, kind of, right, for the creative direction and everything. So
yeah, I just did all the creative direction for Price's album. Foes just came out. Foes is going crazy. Shout out to Price again.
Love that album. Great album.
Yeah, the album. It's free on Evan Street. I did the cover art, the front and the back, and then there's a digital booklet too that goes with it. So I did all the design and layout for that. I've actually done a lot of work with Price on other things outside of music too, which has been really cool. So him and Nate, I would say, are pretty consistent with. They probably take up they're probably like both 30% each of my graphic design time, and then everyone else makes up the other 20%.
Yeah, I see you got the hoodie on too, the colored hoodie. So
yeah. So I designed the colored logo. Shout out to the color team too. Anthony, Loant. We they just sent me a care package of a bunch of merch that we designed, and it's like this is one of them, but a bunch of Foes pieces, some really dope shit. You guys should check it out. It's online. I'll get you the link after, Anthony, so you can put it in the podcast.
Yeah, sick. I'll have to drop it in at least a video for sure. So I know like I said, I discovered you on Instagram and everything, and that was probably 7 years ago now. So, social media has changed a good amount since 2014. So for you, how have you kind of adapted to that? Has it never really changed for you? Have you just always been like, upload the artwork and kind of just show people your work, or has there been any strategy as far as that's gone, or how do you feel about all that?
Yeah, it's definitely been, I would say, it's definitely come and gone. Social media is one of those things where you have to remain extremely consistent on it to especially build like a fan base or build, any type of following. I don't put as much stock into the social media these days as I probably did when I was just starting out. But that's also because social media's changed so much with like the buying followers and robots and comments, and like I just don't care about any of that. I never cared about really like the number of followers I had. I actually don't even have a Facebook. I haven't since 2010. I deleted it like over a decade ago. I even only keep my Instagram just to show my design work on there. I do have a website and a portfolio, but that I don't even keep as updated as I should. I think mainly it's because I probably don't put as much time or stock into that as I probably once did or probably should, because I have my hands full with everything I got going on current day. I'm not really looking for, additional jobs right now. Like I said, I kind of already got enough on my plate. Especially with the main two artists, like you said, like between Price and Audio Push and Nate Good, like, they definitely keep me busy. But I would say it's, you need to know how to network. The more important thing is knowing how to network than knowing how to run your socials.
Yeah.
So I might not have a lot of followers or engagement on something, but I could care less about that. But if I can I'll put it this way. I would rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies. And what I mean by that is I would rather have 4 people that follow me that I really actually want me to follow me than 100 people that I could care less if they actually follow me, and it's just to inflate a number.
Yeah.
So I feel like I kind of got to a point where I, at least for myself, was happy with where I was at, who I was, working with, who I was connected to, and I felt comfortable with not pursuing it farther and pushing harder in that regard. So, I mean, socials are definitely vitally important for networking, and for continuing to keep networking. But I don't, like I said, I don't really put as much stock in the likes or in the overall numbers on the socials.
Yeah, exactly. I think you just hit the nail like right on the head, because that's how I've always viewed it. It's just like, I always say I wouldn't even be on it if I didn't have to be for like my music career. You know what I mean? Like, if I could not be on Instagram ever again, it would be too soon. Like, I would get rid of it ASAP. But it's like, I just use it for networking. Like you said, it's like, it's a great tool. If you utilize it for the right purposes and just try and block out all the bullshit that's on there, it's helpful. But don't get invested in, like you said, the likes, the comments, the followers. It's like, none of that's real. You know what I mean? The engagement, the networking that you'll do, and the relationships you can build, that's real. If you can take those outside of there and utilize them, that's like the end goal. You know what I mean? So
right, like this interaction happening because of social media is real.
Yeah, exactly.
But and a lot of the connections I've made have come from social media. But what, like you said, what's most important is knowing the interaction that comes from that is what matters, or is at the end of the day is what's most important.
Yeah.
It's not, it's just too fake. I mean, and everything's off of the algorithms keep changing, and I think it's just too monetized and too monetary driven now. So again, you need to know how to finesse it and how to use it and use it successfully. It's definitely vitally important. But I definitely don't put much stock into it, and I definitely could care less about it.
Exactly.
I just don't honestly give a fuck
it's
about it.
It's discouraged me so much as far as, like, let's just say Instagram. Like, how Instagram has changed is just not what I remember it being. It's just not the same. Like, I feel like it used to just be so much more free to just, like, discover people and create what you wanted, and not really, like, you'd be able to see everyone you're following. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be able to see, if I was following a couple hundred people, I'd see it in my timeline. I'd see everybody that posted. Now I feel like I don't see any of it because they don't let me see any of it.
Exactly,
so,
same thing. I think I probably see less than, I would say probably, again, I don't go on it that frequently. I'm not on it every day, but when I do go on it, it's like, I feel like I always see the stuff from the same, like, 5 accounts. Yeah. It's like not even, and I don't even like this shit half the time, so I don't even know what the algorithm's basing it off of now, but, it's definitely a tool it's definitely a very powerful tool, but it's one of those things that's constantly changing, and you need to constantly be able to adapt with it. And I think, like, again, my sights aren't so set on the socials and building like a following on there, because it doesn't really pay any dividends, or it doesn't, it doesn't do anything for me in the real world. What I need to, it's much more real to be able to call an artist that I need to call, and so yeah,
exactly. And like I said, like for you, for example, you have that network built already. Like you're established in what you're trying to do. You know what I mean? And you'll make it happen how you're supposed to make it happen. So I feel like that's exactly what you need to be doing anyway, as opposed to just spending all your time, like you said, on something that isn't really tangible anyway. So very important stuff to kind of remember there. So as far as graphic design goes, let's say there's someone who is just starting out. They want to do album art. They want to do projects, work with artists specifically, or maybe they just want to do graphic work in general for a company or something. What do you think would be a great piece of advice that you give them as far as, you got to watch out for this, or something you had to go through early on that was kind of a learning curve?
Definitely create every day, whether you're going to post it or not. Just, you can get lucky and you might hit the big shot in the game, but you're not going to hit the big shot every time if you're not practicing.
Yep.
Right. So you got to put in the time and the work. And, that's one thing where, like, for myself, like, I wish I was, like, when I was first starting out, I had opportunities that I wish I had seized more. Like, I could have, I could have taken high school classes that were like Photoshop based and purely driven around Photoshop. But at that time, my eyes were set on something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having a passion for it is obviously the most important, because that's what's going to get you to start and pick up a pen, or, try making something, or try creating. But then just consistency and sticking with it. Again, and that's the thing too, is don't make things to appease to everyone or to please things. Make things that you like personally. I've always found the most success with things that I put my actual, I feel fully engaged in and wholly hearted into it. If you're just looking to create to get something out of it, again, like, if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, it's probably not going to ultimately pan out for you. But I would say if you have a passion for it and want to create, like, the biggest thing you can do is just start creating and just put yourself out there. And, again, don't be afraid to try new things or go outside the box. It's a huge, like, the graphic design world and landscape is like a huge, ever-evolving landscape of people and folks. And, there's designers that, like, just started designing, like, 2 months ago that are putting out things that I'm like, oh my God, like, this is phenomenal. Like, and I'm like, I just turned 30 and I've been designing now for, 10 plus years. And I'm like, I have my bachelor's of art, I have a BA in graphic design. Like, I went to school for this. Like, I have done a lot of great design work and cool things, but, like, there's always someone out there that's, like, better and putting in more time and doing things. So I would say, like, if you're doing it for the right reasons and doing it just out of your own passion for it, the biggest thing you can do is just try new things and stay consistent with it.
Absolutely. Love that. And I feel like that's really consistent across anything you do. You know what I mean? It's like you got to have some type of work ethic for it to pan out. And it really has to just be you putting in the work. If no one's there looking over your shoulder, you got to be the one to do it. So
the shit's not made for the weak. And if people don't have that, like you said, if they don't have someone looking over their shoulder, making sure that they're doing something or putting the time in where they need to be, if you're not that self-disciplined for yourself, you're probably not going to see success. Because it takes an extraordinary amount of self-discipline and devotion to be able to stay that consistent and committed to something, anything. I mean, like, that goes for relationships, it goes for, work, it goes for whatever. It could be anyone's passion, but then people's passions change too, and that's the thing that's important. Like, your passions might change, but can it change, and can you adopt that change into a way that you're able to also, continue to grow and progress with it and not be hindered by it. So, life has a funny way of throwing challenges and obstacles at you, but it's about how you overcome them in the end.
Exactly. So if you could go back 10 years ago, maybe give yourself a piece of advice or maybe not change anything at all, what do you think you would do?
Probably would be, if anything, it probably would just be to. I don't want to say stay committed because it's not that I haven't been committed, but I think I would probably have just like tried to persuade myself to be more committed earlier on than I was. In the beginning, it was much more like, again, it was more of a passion and more of like, this is for fun and I just enjoy doing it. I wish I had been able to like connect some of the dots a little earlier on. But again, you learn through those experiences and you learn through failures generally. So, I feel like I probably wouldn't tell. I try not to think about the what ifs or like go back in time.
Yeah.
So really, I think if I was to be able to do that, give myself advice, it would just be, stick with it, stay committed, don't be deterred. Because there were certainly times where, like, I had gaps where it was like, oh, I didn't design for like 3 months all of a sudden, and I'm like, the hell, I went from designing, 4 things a day to not designing anything for countless weeks on end. But sometimes too, you gotta try and push through lack of inspiration and lack of creativity. So again, just remaining committed.
Yeah. So 10 years from now, where do you think you see yourself, your career, just your whole life in general? What do you think you see for yourself?
I think I'll probably be doing a lot of the same stuff I'm doing now, just probably on a little bit different of a scale. Just in the last year alone, I expanded from doing primarily just cover art work to I did a food truck last year. I did a couple of like stage set designs. I did a couple restaurant menus. I did a handful of like logos for other businesses outside of music. Probably one of the coolest things I did was the viewers or the listeners won't be able to see this, but Push THC cartridges. I designed the logo and the whole packaging for these, and these are out in dispensaries in Cali. So it was pretty cool to be able to do something and be able to physically touch it.
Yeah.
All the colored stuff. I've had the pleasure of working on a lot of cool things over the last year, especially with the state of the world and the pandemic. So, again, I'm fortunate and blessed. I think really in 10 years, like, I probably envision myself having, a clothing label. I would like to at some point. I don't. It's hard because I don't know exactly what it'll look like because it keeps, in my mind, the terms keep changing. But I've definitely always wanted to continue to stay involved in the music space, and whether that's doing cover art or graphic design work for artists. I would also like to be in a position where I can, help other graphic designers, like kind of like pair them together, and also be in a position where I can put musicians on, because I've always, again, going back to our earlier conversation, just always been very passionate about music and hip hop in general, and I swear if I could go back 15 years and if I had a label created, the world doesn't know the type of label we would have had, because, or if I could have made investments early on certain artists, like, and bet my life savings on them, it would be a different world today. So, 10 more years, I think 10 more years of doing a lot of the same stuff, but just doing it on a bigger scale.
Yeah, that's awesome, though. So do you have any final words of wisdom today for the listeners?
I think just remain true to yourself. Try to stay committed to yourself and consistent. Again, the biggest thing really at the end of the day is why are you doing it, and what's the reason you're doing it for. And if again it's for the right reasons, things will tend to naturally work out. If it's for the wrong reasons, then you're probably going to end up running into a little more issues. But life's full of like full circle moments. I think I think back to myself, even when I was graduating college, I couldn't fathom like working with some of the artists that I've worked with already or doing some of the things that I've already done. So I think too, just not ever like selling yourself short and boxing yourself in, and just keep shooting for the moon is really the best advice I can give, because you never know what's going to happen or where things are going to turn out. But like I said, the practice piece is very, very important, because that's going to show at the end of the day if you were there in the gym working all those hours, or if you weren't. So it'll show in your craft, and it will bleed through eventually. But like I said too, like going back to the full circle moments, like listening to an artist in high school and then working with that artist a couple years later out of high school. Currency is a good example. Like Currency, I can't tell you how much Currency and Spit Andretti I listened to in high school, or how much my friends listened to him, and then to work with him in audio push on a song together. Or T-Pain, like Buy You a Drink was like all that was played everywhere in 2006, 2007, if I am dating it correctly. And and then I had the pleasure to work with T-Pain, and you just like I said, life's full of those full circle moments, and you never know if you stop. So all you can do is remain consistent and remain persistent, and generally it'll pay off in the end.
Totally agree, man. Totally agree. And that's all I have for you today, man. Like I said, I appreciate you reaching back to me, getting on the show. Like I said, after all these years, it's kind of good to have the conversation, you know what I mean? I'm glad to see that you're still here doing great things, doing great work, and obviously we're going to keep working together. And I wish you nothing but the best, man.
Yeah, thanks to you, Anthony. I appreciate you. Looking forward to hearing from Jay on the next album, and we'll see what's in store. But same to you, and I appreciate your time, brother.
Thanks, everyone, for listening today. That was episode number 56. As always, hit the support button on your podcast streaming platform if you'd like to send any funds and support. And until next week, we'll see you then. Thanks for listening.